computer.
Oh, there it is.
And why, did it show you something when I did that?
Yeah, it's recording.
Oh, come on. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the ICAA podcast, future podcast on general contractors. Okay, JB, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Thanks. My name is JB Ferrarone. I own a small residential construction company out here in the Bay Area of California, and we build sort of from Napa and Sonoma all the way down to the peninsula, and then in San Francisco, and sort of all variations of high-end residential. So, Christine, on your blog and on your webpage and on some of this other stuff, I noticed all like those terrifying stories of leaks and air infiltration, all the things that keep me up at night. So it's awesome to see that that's being celebrated.
What are you talking about? You guys don't even have weather in California.
We have seismic though, and there's all sorts of yeah.
I did a post really recently on detailing slab edges, like simple turn down slabs, which you guys don't really do in California, but they're popular in the rest of the country. And so I did this post on what you need to do from a water control perspective for the most simple kind of slab that we have. And I got a ton of comments from people in California being like, you can't do that. I'm like, yeah, I know you can't do that. I can do that. You guys can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, the seismic thing is pretty interesting, like just moment frames and shear and things like that, because growing up on the East Coast and learning construction on the East Coast, it's just like totally different. But it's all the same. I mean, at the end of the day, house still leaks.
Yeah. All right. So, JB, you're here because you are the tonight's in-house expert on general contractor stuff. So the expectation is most of the audience, the listening audience, will be architects. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to give an experienced, successful, relatively high-end residential general contractor an opportunity to talk a little bit about, the way you see things from your side of the fence. So I'm pretty sure no architects are ever going to listen to this. So you should really feel free to let it fly tonight. I mean, but there's a few topics I want to hit, but the one that comes to mind for me early on, meaning now, is shop drawing review. So, there's tons of shop drawings on a project, the kind of projects you're involved with, windows and occasionally rebar and structural steel and cabinets and et cetera, right? I know what it says in most architects' specifications, but what do you feel like from a general contractor's point of view, besides producing the shop drawings initially, what do you feel like your responsibility is with them?
It's funny you should ask that, because what I feel my responsibility and what the IAA contract says is the responsibility are sort of two separate things. So, I mean, if you really get into the IAA contract, what the architects, it pushes all the onus back on the GC and the subs, which can be really difficult, especially when we design through the shop drawing process. So for a first topic, it's a pretty brutal one, because it's like we're at odds just off the bat. The contract says, and then some architects have a stamp that says reviewed, but not approved.
Yeah.
The approved word.
My first office, I was like, I don't understand. They're asking for approval. And my boss was like, yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Review it.
Yeah, I never really dug into that. I don't understand it either. I don't believe it's ever going to make a difference in court, but what do I know? So anyway.
So I think the shop drawing process is really interesting, because sometimes we just don't get architectural drawings that are detailed enough. So we really need shop drawings for everything. I mean, and we're right. So we review them in-house before, and we actually have our stamp that we put on them, because years ago an architect was like, I don't want to see this until I know that you've reviewed it. And it was a really good lesson for us, because, you know, there's times where you can just like push the paper so quickly. You know, it comes in from the cabinet sub, you save it, log it, put a submittal number on it and send it out. And then the guy's like, this isn't what I want, or, you know, so, so some of this it's a good step for us, but we can't do that level of.
Let me ask like a kind of a detailed question. So cabinet shop drawings, how much do you expect the architect to be checking dimensions rather than, you know, you or your sub checking dimensions?
We're good on the dimension side. We'll handle the dimensions, but, you know, the detail and how everything lines up and comes together, you know, we want the architect to.
But I mean, they have to check some dimensions because like they're into this proportionality thing.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So, but they're not going to go measure the room. So I find it to be this really weird crossover that I don't mentally know the resolution on it.
Typically we try to measure the room and everything before shop drawings as like the first step of the shop, so that we're really detailed. Like maybe there's a strip at each end that can go anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to, you know, maybe 1.5 inches, but no more than that. We want the cabinet maker has already gone out and done his measurement.
I think it's interesting too, though, something that might be helpful to add to this part of the discussion is that there are, in my view, two really different categories of general contractor. One is a general contractor who views the job as who views himself as a broker, a pass-through, a sort of, well, I just hire I'm a broker. I hire subs and they do the work, and I just facilitate this really financial transaction between the architect owner and the subcontractors. That's one kind of general contractor, and I don't work with them. The second kind of general contractor, and I don't think, I mean, really any kind of, especially the buildings that you're building, most of the buildings, and I assume that a lot of the listeners are buildings, that's not the kind of GC that you want on your job. The second category is a GC who really views themselves as being not just brokers, but sometimes partners in design, but having a really active role in really coordinating the job. And those are two really different things. Like figuring out sequencing and sort of proactively identifying areas of the design that need further development based on, you know, changes in scope or something that you can't anticipate early in design. Like that's completely different than the sort of pass-through stuff, like your earlier example of, I'm just going to get the shop drawings from the glazer and I'll just send it to the architect and just dump it in their lap. Like,
yeah. So, well, Molly, you mind if I ask you, like you probably see a range of general contractors across the world. Like what split of what Christy just described do you see typically?
I think typically for most of the projects in our office, it's the second kind, and we think of ourselves very much as partners with them. And I think, especially with repeat clients, these builders are in on the projects from the get-go. It's not a traditional delivery method where you're just bidding and then joining. You're involved in the very beginning, developing the wall section, developing the project. And I think you get a lot more buy-in from a team that way. So you end up with a much more successful relationship when you get to CA. You've already spent months working with someone. And, you know, like we said, we don't want to spend years drawing documents that will never be used when you're building a project. So I think the biggest key our office takes away is if you can get a builder involved earlier, it certainly helps in the long run.
What's crazy is that a lot of times this type of those contractors are more expensive. Mm-hmm. But in the long run, I think a lot of times they are not more expensive because you're not just doing this stuff on the fly. And I bet the general contractor who's here has some good thoughts on that. And
we're 100% wanting to get in early on board because there's, you know, just to your note, Molly, about like there's certain things where we don't need you to draw them, or don't waste your time. Like millwork is a great example. It's like an elevation is fine. Let's have a meeting with the mill worker. You know, don't draw that. Don't detail that. Like showing, every once in a while we'll get drawings with where the architects have detailed the dovetailed boxes. I'm like, that is not a good use of your time.
JB, let's just Ferguson Shmami, and you may want to like.
Oh no, I'm 2 years in. 2 years in reviewing millwork shop drawing for one project, and we spent months drawing way too much, and they never build it that way. Not a single detail in the shop matches.
No kidding.
Yeah, and that's a
your
big
drawers.
lesson learned.
Come on, your drawers. They do the drawers.
No,
They changed the drawers on us.
Oh my God. Okay, sorry, JB. Go on.
It's amazing. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be drawn, and then there's certain things, you know, like stairs, for example. Like I would love more time spent with stairs. So like, don't draw the cabinets, dive into the stairs, model the stairs, do everything you need. Those are complicated things, you know. So, and that's where, you know, for our point, the cabinet maker can take a pretty elevation and be like, I know exactly how to make this thing work. But the stairs are very complicated. You know, it could take like 6 or so different subcontractors. So not having that really figured out is really bogs us down. You know,
well, that, you know,
person there.
I got a question in that regard. Do you think that happens, meaning that being like, there seems to be this overemphasis on cabinet details and an underemphasis on stair coordination because it's like greater familiarity with like how woodwork goes together versus this complex spatial thing, three-dimensional spatial thing with stairs. In other words, like every human, like you kind of gravitate towards what you have more ability at, you know? Molly?
I mean, I think that's certainly true. You said an interesting thing about models. I think we're moving more and more towards modeling the stairs that we want, as opposed to spending, you know, hours working out the curves in a drawing that then the mill worker eventually will redo anyway. So if you can hand a three-dimensional design to someone and they can create the documents from that, that saves a lot of time on our end. And then we're positive that we like what it looks like before you have a mock-up built.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that takes Revit, right? You can't do that in AutoCAD, can you?
No, we've done it in SketchUp or 3D Max. The rendering department can help us with that modeling stuff. So
okay.
I think more and more we're noticing in stuff that isn't cabinetry, that isn't just straight millwork that we're familiar with, a model is a useful tool.
Yeah, for sure. And
I don't know. I mean, yes, I agree that it's a useful tool, but I'm going through growing pains right now on a particular project where the construction documents are instead of construction documents, we just have a model, and that's
You get a shop drawing from that, because then we'll spend, you know, weeks looking at a shop drawing of everything.
No, and that's really the trouble, because the model was designed to show the client what the space is going to look like, which is important. Like, architects have a hard job. They have to, that's critical. Your client needs to like needs to be able to picture, needs to be able to like what you're doing for them. But building a model for aesthetic purposes is completely different than providing information to the contractor who's going to need to know how to actually build this stuff. So when it comes to the project I'm working on right now is a 17,000 square foot house, beautiful house, but we're really struggling to answer the really kind of practical questions like, okay, how does, you know, where we have a window meet the roof, what happens? Because we know what it, you know, sort of what it looks like in the model, but the model isn't real life. So you can do all these like weird things in models that you can't do in reality, like trim that just sort of floats, you know, masonry that is just magically there. It doesn't have any angles, any supports or anything like that. So it's, I don't know, the modeling is great for stuff that's complicated like stairs, but I think sometimes doesn't do you as many favors as you'd like when you have to actually figure out how something is going to go together. Do you ever get that?
Can I tell my quick modeling story?
Tell your modeling story.
So, I was a contractor like JB. I really didn't know anything about, how architects produce their deliverable product, meaning drawings, specifications. But then I went to work in an architect's office, Charles Hilton Architects, Greenwich, Connecticut. Nice guy, nice firm. Does a very nice set of drawings with regard to detail and colors for layers and tons of ink. So they're going through the development of the drawings for like a 3-story chimney mass with like 3 fireplaces in it, right? So the flues are all over the place and it's got to wind around and there's structure and there's all this stuff, right? So I'm involved in redlining and all this. And I go in to talk to the drafts person, because she's got some question for me. And so she pulls it up in her model in Revit, and she says, hold on, like, let me flip it around so we can see this better. And she took the entire chimney mass, which was in 3D, and flipped it over and spun it around, right? So we could look like, as if we were like, I don't know what, like we were hanging from a rope and looking up at something. And I said, wait a minute, are you telling me we have the ability to look at this in this crazy amount of 3D detail, but we're not giving it to that poor mason who's freezing out there in the middle of the winter, and he's got to deal with some floppy piece of paper that's like half frozen? Like, this is insanity. Like, so I was blown away by the quality of models the moment I saw that. And I wished at that moment, like, we could just give that to every contractor as they're building. Let them spin this 3D thing around and figure out, right, JB? Because like those stairs are.
Yeah, I like it.
We had a similar situation with CES, the engineer that we work with all the time, mechanical engineer, and just discovered that all of their drawings actually can be 3D. They can be viewed in 3 dimensions. So you can see the ducts and the volume and have an understanding from the, very beginning phases of a project, how much space you need in that sandwich for your floor. Yeah. And it was just a hallelujah moment. We're like, why are we not looking at this? Because we have some projects with BIM models, so you get that detail through there. But otherwise, when you're in a New York apartment, I mean, it would be very helpful to understand where the ducts are going from the get-go.
Well, that's a JB. This leads me right back to you. What's your expectation with regard to coordination of things behind the drywall in any project? Meaning, I think the AIA contract basically says, like, good luck to you. But if the design has 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, like, it doesn't matter how good you are, there's nothing you can do. So how do you work that out?
Well, it's funny, and it's different across the board. Different architects do a different amount of coordination. Some, and sometimes that's the client's fault, right? They don't pay for all of the architectural back office support to do it right. So, sometimes clients are like, we want to start, we want to get going sooner. So get us a permit, get building. It's going to take 2.5 years to build the house anyway. So I want to start. It's very rare for us, probably in the last definitely 5+ years, for us to get a fully set of engineered drawings, the whole deal, architectural, mechanical, structural is always there, but it's even as simple as like AV is just causing us constant pain. I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal on the architect and it's brutal on us because the client's like, I want to do a bigger TV, or I want to do, these huge, like, in stud bay speakers that that change everything. And it's like, it's not, nobody knew it. So, and it's when they started drawing it, the technology wasn't there. So there are certain things that are really complicated for us that just aren't getting engineered. And that's a design build. AV for the most part is very design build. So
would you say most of your work is becoming that more design build as you go?
Not necessarily. Some of it is forced to do it to really have a good mechanical plan. But it's funny, we don't do as much air conditioning on the West Coast as you guys do. So like Radiant, the assembly is really easy.
Yeah, it's
So
just, yeah.
there isn't a lot to work out.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes people will be like midway, they're like, we want AC now. And that's really, really complicated. And then the ripple effect is huge. But a lot of our projects do have fully engineering, and those are awesome, and everything fits in. But it's the other types of projects that can be equally as nice and even as high as square foot, you know, dollar per square foot. But there's just not that level of, you know, detail and working everything out. So it's sort of across the board.
Okay, so since you talked about AV and you're in the Bay Area, you've probably got some clients who really care about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe have some inside scoop on some AV stuff. But anyway, your comment makes me wonder what the craziest request, design related or building related request you've gotten for a client.
I mean, the craziest things that we do for the most part are, you know, just it's the theaters, it's the home theaters that on a price per square foot that people spend on theaters for, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 people.
I'm actually kind of surprised to hear that. Really, it's home theaters that are.
Yeah, the rest of the stuff, you'd be surprised. Actually, out here in the Bay Area, people are moving away from fully automated systems. You know, getting simpler, more app-based, because a lot of these clients are on the boards and they know these things that are coming down the road, and they don't necessarily want to put all the wires in the walls because they know the app is going to change, and so keep it app-based. So
like small, discrete systems that you can adapt. You know, one isn't dependent on another and another and another. So.
Yeah, and the technology, they know the technology is going to change twice before they finish it. So
why don't they figure that out with their kitchen appliances too?
That, you know, they spend a lot more. They don't spend too much time in the kitchen. So.
Oh, yeah. But man, how many jobs have you done where, you know, the shop drawings got approved, you know, with one particular appliance, and by the time it's all ready to get installed, they don't even make that appliance anymore.
Sub-Zero does it to us every 2 years.
Exactly.
I have to say, I'm actually pretty sympathetic to that. As a consumer, on the consumer side, I renovated my own house, and this is my first house. I renovated it before I moved in, but I didn't know how to cook. I knew nothing about cooking, and renovated the kitchen, and, you know, made all these decisions without knowing how to cook. Now I know how to cook. We definitely do it differently, but I imagine that happens a lot for especially people building high-end stuff who have big jobs and aren't spending a whole lot of time cooking, maybe.
Well, actually,
although, you know, California lifestyle, sort of healthy living in the kitchen, organic, I don't know.
I mean, we laugh all the time. I'll laugh with clients. I'm like, whoa, we're building this beautifully. You're not supposed to cook in it. You're not supposed to use this. You know, the architects are like, totally agree. This is perfect. Don't scratch it. Don't mess it up. Just leave it. Look at it. Show it off. Don't use it.
How's that work out for you?
I don't know. But
well, Molly, you know, this is your night. You're like the co-host tonight. But how do you go through those meetings with clients, you know, to ferret out what they're ultimately going to be happy with when they, like, you know, take a client like Christy. Imagine Christy's your client, and it turns out when the project starts, she doesn't know how to cook. And by the time the project ends, she's like, you know, Chef Ramsay.
I was inspired by the space.
Yeah.
Right. You know, but
I mean, I think we do recommend a lot of things based on our own experience. Like we make an appliance book, you show a picture what it can do. And a lot of these people either have staff and they're deferring to staff's preference for what they want in the kitchen, or have other homes and the decorators just says match what's in the other home. Because you're right, a lot of the clients themselves are not necessarily invested in the kitchen or the appliances.
Yeah. All right, JB.
That was my problem also. I mean, previously my staff just worried about it.
Yeah. So your turn in the hot seat, JB.
all right.
So I don't know how many projects you do a year, but my guess is like overall between big and small, you probably got 12 or 20 or something like that. Um, all sorts of different design documents out there, meaning drawings. And as you know, they come in all kinds of different varieties. Some are exceptionally well detailed and coordinated and et cetera. And some are done by somebody who maybe doesn't even have an architecture degree and they're great decorators and they got hired to be the architect somehow. How do you deal with that as a general contractor?
Well, it's hard because they're all different, right? And that normally we think it's the clients who are driving this one, you know, that they're not willing to invest in like a full set of specs or
is it they just don't know?
correct, or they don't know, or you know, we have multiple projects where the interior designers are the alpha designer and there'll be an architect that comes up, you know, as a sort of partner to help with details and things like that, coordination. So some of that's just not their specialty. Some architects just don't put as much emphasis on it, but at a certain point in time, like we're going to get to the details sooner or later. We're going to get down to the nitty gritty. But I think specs are, it takes time and it takes money to get those right.
Yeah.
I think those are two things that, the money thing aside, it's the time issue that we see. People just don't want to spend that because you don't need the spec book to get a permit.
Right. But let me ask you this. So, you know, in the end, for both the architect and the contractor, you know, the product is the built thing.
Yeah.
And the built thing has like, it's no longer a spec book or a drawing. It's real stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's a real nail. It's a real bit of paint that somebody stood at a counter and said, I want exactly such and such paint. Give it to me. You know, somebody in the chain spent the time to get the product and every individual component that's there. How do you, as a general contractor, how do you, you know, bid or price yourself, you know, based on the drawings that you get? Meaning, do you have to jack up your price for less detailed drawings, or do you have some architects you charge more for and some you charge less for because of this, or how does that work?
There's not a modifier, but you know, this is where it all gets down to relationships, because you know, we'll work with an architect where we just know, you know, even though the drawings don't show it or the specs don't show it, we know the level they're looking for, whether it be paint or you know subcontractors, right? In every category, you know, we have a couple A painters, and then we've got some A- painters and maybe some B+ painters, and that's a hard thing in a competitive bid, right? You know, do we bring in the A? Do we bring in the B+? But when we are brought in early, we can have that conversation, because some of our clients, you know, they could have young kids and they're like, look, we're going to repaint this house every 2 years. So let's not go A+ on the paint because little Jimmy is going to do some damage. So let's just let it be. And then we've got some other clients who are like museum quality, like has to be perfect. And every year when we go away on vacation, I want you to run a couple guys through here and do touch up. Like we want to live in a brand new house for many, many years. So that doesn't transfer very well in a competitive bid situation at all. So that's the kind of conversation that we need to have.
Yeah.
Like while we're on paint, like, you know, the difference between like a Ferrarone ball per gallon and Benjamin Moore is like 2 times. So
at least, yeah.
15,000 square foot house, that's a real number.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Wait. Maybe they don't ship all those fine paints of Europe all the way to California. Wait till you get to that.
So I think of a lot of design and building houses in particular as being sort of like this, like an iceberg, where the stuff that's above the water is the stuff that your client, the owner, the homeowner, already knows about. they know about it, they can see it, they have an interest in, and you can talk to them about it. Like, and this is mostly their interior finishes. And the stuff, the part of the iceberg that's under the water is all the stuff that they expect you to just take care of for them. It's stuff that they're not thinking about, they don't want to think about. You just have to do it, or somebody has to do it. And this is the area where in my particular corner of the industry where I see a lot of failures and a lot of risk that isn't really priced into jobs and is sort of unaccounted for. So if you don't make the decision, if the owner doesn't make the decision still gets made for them. And maybe it's something they're happy with, maybe it's not. And usually when I get a phone call, it's because somebody's very unhappy with it. But I've seen, billionaires' houses with the types of detailing and the types of stuff that's in their walls, in their wall assemblies that, is below average for a typical multifamily podium low-end apartment going up in, any town USA. For billionaires. And it's not because somebody didn't, they care a lot about their house, but somehow this didn't end up happening. Do you lose work for this? Do you have your own minimum standards on this? Owners, I think it's, in some sense, I think that owners get what they pay for. And a lot of I really do think that a lot of owners are responsible. I'm sorry to say this. I'm very sympathetic when an owner has experiences these types of failures, but you didn't spend a whole lot of time asking about the details or hiring professionals who handled this stuff for you. So I do place a lot of this on the owners, but I'm also sympathetic to them not being specialists in this. So do you, JB, have minimum standards for yourself, for your sort of wall assembly or these types of the bottom part of the iceberg? Like, this is our standard way of detailing walls or roofs or foundation systems or whatever. And this is how we manage risk for ourselves. If the owner, even without the owner asking or knowing about it, or even without the architect demanding this is our own sort of minimum spec. Do you have that for some clients, not for others? How do you handle this type of risk?
We do, and we find this risk in two places. It's in waterproofing and it's in acoustical assemblies.
Huh.
So sound can be a huge, I've seen more disappointment in clients where, their kids are running around upstairs and you're down in their beautiful, paneled dining room, and it sounds like they're running on your head. And it's like nobody's fault.
Nodding her head here.
Yeah.
We hire acoustical consultants all the time for this reason.
Yeah, and it's like I've seen more. And Molly, or Christine, to your question about like it's like real disappointment. The client's like, I had no idea that this would be such a big problem. Yeah, gone are the days where it's like, oh, we hear toilets flushing or water in the wall. That's not a problem. But it's like the running and the sound transfer between floors, and it's amazing because they've moved in, and it's one of these things you can't model it during construction. You can't figure it out. They have their first party and then they figure it out, and it's like the toothpaste has left the tube, and it's a real bummer. And those are, you feel like you've like let them down in not figuring that out, because like waterproofing, on the other hand, is it's different. Like we know better, or we should, in certain details. So to your question about like what we think of as best cases, for the most part now, we waterproof bathrooms, the shower, liquid, and then we go all the way out to the door, because it's just, it's just worth it. We've waterproof stuff, and then they're like, if the kid puts enough water outside the shower, it's just not going to work. So there's certain things we just now do, liquid waterproof being one of them, that's like our that's our bathroom staple kind of thing.
There's a few things like that where I'm like, look, if you're building more than one thing, anything, like just do this, because the one failure you have in the decade of your building will pay, like it more than pays for the, you know, the 10% upcharge on each.
Oh yeah.
Individual instance. Yeah.
Well, I like to tell people all the time, the rainiest place on the face of the earth is everybody's shower stall.
Yeah.
I think we also, on our end, try to think of ourselves really as advocates for the owner. Like that's what the contract basically is. We're supposed to be an agent for the owner. So we know better, we know best practices, and that's why a good spec is so important, because if we can direct the assembly to be acoustically rated, or if we can control the waterproofing spec for all the bathrooms, we really should be, because that's looking out for the owner's best interest.
Yeah, well, that actually leads me to another hot seat question for JB. So every architect on every project pretty much not only gets to see your contract, they probably participated in its creation. My guess is you've probably only seen one or two architects' contracts in your entire career, if that many. And I find that to be an odd thing. In other words, you have two parties that have huge responsibilities that are contracted with a third party, meaning the homeowner, and the only contractual relationships between the two of these oddball parties, meaning the architect and the contractor, are through a third party, not directly to each other. That's really odd and very difficult. And you have no idea what's in the architect's contract. Am I nuts on this, or is that about sum it up?
No, it's crazy. It is totally crazy. What's amazing too is that the architects see exactly how I make my living. You know, they see your fee, your markup, your general requirements, everything. They see it all. And I don't have any flip side view of, you know, the other parts of the team.
What you don't know is that architects would do it for free. So.
Well, the other thing is you don't know there's definitely more money in building than there is in architecture.
I think he knows.
No, I don't doubt that. But even, you know, we'll get a structural engineer to take the architects off the hot seat. Every once in a while, you know, the client at a meeting or the architect will be like, gosh, we have another ad service for the structural engineer. And we're like, well, we could have helped if we could have tuned in their scope, you know, had we seen it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So I think those are some good things. I mean, and I totally, I think the architecture side is special. You know, clients are buying a vision and things like that. But like the structural engineer and even the mechanical engineer, some of those consultants, like I would really love to see their stuff before, so I know exactly what they're missing or leaving out. Or if they're like, hey, it's going to be ad service for the stairs, you're like, well, we should pick that up now. Because
we're really the ones that are reviewing the consultant's invoices. The owners obviously contract directly with them, but we're the ones that review the structural, the mechanical, all of their invoices come through the architect.
Yeah.
Speaking of structural engineers, I've been sort of, one of my closest and dearest friends is a structural engineer. And one of the things that I've been constantly in my career, especially like right now in my career, so surprised at is how many kind of accommodations you can get from the structural engineer if you ask.
Oh yeah.
Where they're like, oh, is that something you wanted? Well, okay, we can do that for you. But nobody asked them, so we couldn't. Like, it's crazy how many decisions we sort of assume that the structural engineer's first iteration of something is like
they can always change it. They can always change it. Any beam can be cut out and shored up. You can do anything you want.
Well, and like, and I'm thinking, I'm working right now on a bunch of kind of complicated stuff that's below grade, where below grade forming systems, for example, like that you can change it. It's like, oh, we don't have to do this. We don't have to make this shotcrete because that'll affect the waterproofing. Yeah, sure, we can do something else. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And you just have to ask, but you have to know enough to ask. And anyway, that's
Yeah.
kind of cracks me up about some of these consultants where they're making a lot of assumptions that that we don't realize they're making, and we can help them and they can help us.
Well, JB, what percentage of projects that you get involved with do you get called in or participate in what I'm going to call the development meetings? Maybe there's 6 or 8 or 10 months worth of, before construction starts, the drawings are getting developed, and like weekly or monthly meetings where the entire team gets together and say, okay, this is where we're going, and oh, I don't like that, I like this, oh no, let's change that. What percentage of jobs does that happen for you?
Maybe 10 or 15 where you're really sort of a seat at the table for design type, those early,
right.
Projects.
Do you think that's a big benefit, or you wasted your time? Like, come on, I'm busy. Like, call me when you're done, or?
No, I think it's always good. I mean, we always love to be there. I think it's always good to kind of know what everybody's thinking, and just then you can understand sort of what's the super important thing with the client or the architect or the designer, and just more time before we break ground, the better.
Yeah. I think it really develops the trust and relationship amongst the team. And that's what I've noticed on projects that I've worked on where the builder is involved early. You don't really get to that adversarial point because you've been working with them and you respect them and their opinions, and they vice versa. So when there is the problem 10 months down the line, everyone comes to the table at a much calmer state than if, they weren't involved and they didn't feel like they had buy-in.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. It's really, really hard to work through a project when it gets to that adversarial state. And it's a very difficult position for both the contractor, the subs, and the architect, and
the owner. Like, nothing is worse than a punch list that doesn't stop. Like, when you have that project that you just can't get everything done at the end. I mean, owner's least favorite point, and that's when they should be the happiest, and they're moving in, and it just never gets that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and it puts them in the position of sort of adjudicating what must seem to them like sort of childish debates.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not a fun position to be in. So,
JB, how many projects have come in under budget?
Well, it's a relative term. How many projects are unchanged?
That sounds. Now you're being defensive.
No, that's sorry. I think on budget is a relative term, because I think we see, we can hold the line. I don't feel like, I think subs do it, for the most part, we subcontract fixed price with subs. We don't subcontract T&M. It would have to be a very unique thing. So the subs are holding the line. So the next thing is, am I holding the schedule? And that sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't, for a whole host of different reasons. And then there's the changes, right? Whether it be owner initiated, whether it's, just different design conditions, or, it could be the building department. There's a lot of different things.
It could be pandemic. God only knows. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, although our clients have taken that one pretty well. For the first, I delivered that news that like everybody's 8 weeks behind schedule, and everyone's like, okay, so it worked out. So the on time, on budget thing, and it's a relative, because I think the client wants to go to, back to his coworkers or at a cocktail party and be like, we're ahead of schedule, or we're under budget, or we're over budget, right? Or gosh, we're over budget. But like we leave out, like, I did add a wine cellar downstairs, and sort of changed the whole foundation, and this is why we're 2 months behind schedule. So there's things that are left out in that conversation. Same thing to be said for the architects, right? Like, it's so easy for a client to say, let's make this change, and then it ripples through the design process, and the previous 14 months is totally wasted, but yet we're starting construction next week. And now, so for the first 6 months of the project, we're like chasing the architects because we've changed the assemblies everywhere. It's just a brutal way of doing it. So,
Yeah.
and then you as the client are like, gosh, my architect's behind. Every time I talk to my contractor, he says we're waiting on a detail. It's like, that's crazy. You know, that's just how the game is sort of played.
And we fall into that trap because we're always told, say yes to the client, say yes, you'll figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And then you're right, you don't see the 6 months it takes to actually make that work.
Well, I agree. As Christy will, she probably would have said it before
That's
the end of the.
Foster's advice always. Say yes to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, can always say no later.
Yeah, you say yes,
I feel
of
like
course.
my 20s was a decade of saying yes. I'm nearing the end of my 30s. And I'm learning to say no more. So
I agree. We're like, sure, we can do it. Oh, we'll figure out a way. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. Like, yeah, but that's just the game, though. I mean, residential construction's like that, you know.
Yeah, there was.
also,
I think.
I mean, in some respects, though, I actually find this kind of charming that I'm finding it charming also because we record this in the evenings and I'm drinking some wine and chatting with industry colleagues here. But I think this is, people have different views of things that they don't know a lot about versus things that they begin to learn more about. And it's, I think, lovely when homeowners they make different decisions when they learn more about what goes into building their spaces. And so part of what architects are doing is they're walking the homeowners who are paying for this stuff through a pretty complicated process. And they don't know how complicated it is at first, a lot of the times. So I think that's natural that when you know something better, you make better decisions about it, even though it means that we're sort of scrambling to accommodate those requests. I think ultimately, I mean, wouldn't you rather have a client that learns something new and then makes a decision as a result of new information, as opposed to maybe somebody who's more decisive but intractable and doesn't change based on new information? And it would be easier in a lot of respects to deal with the decisive, intractable client, but for people who really like what they do and enjoy the beauty of the thing that we ultimately create on behalf of somebody else, it's nice when they appreciate what goes into it and are like, yeah, let's do the wine cellar this way, or I like your idea here. Let me pay you more
clients.
Those are the ones you want, though. The people who are like, we sprung this on you. It's awesome. I didn't realize I wanted it this much. And then they have it and they're super happy. And then they're really appreciative of all the hard work that went into it. Those are great.
Those clients exist?
Yeah.
Pull the shade down.
No, it looked, JB, the sun looks cool. I wasn't going to say you were handsome or anything, but it was like, I did notice the sun in your face. I'm like, wow, look at that. Like California sunshine. Like,
it's sunny.
Yeah, it's cool, man. So another hot seat question. And this one, like, I don't think there's any getting out of it as a GC. Sequencing of operations. Like, so you're given a set of drawings and a set of specs that basically just represents the finished product. Doesn't represent anything in between, rarely. Maybe there's like some shoring drawings, some by accident. But normally it's just like plans, elevations, sections, like these are how the parts are going to exist next to each other when things are done. And I don't think I'm completely crazy here. Like, you're 100% responsible for sequencing, putting everything together, which is not trivial, and can really have a major impact. How do you work that out? Is it just kind of like ingrained in the industry, like everybody's been doing it for so long, or do you sit around at pre-construction meetings? Or talk to me.
It's funny, until you brought it up. You make it sound like it's such a big deal.
It is.
Oh, yeah, it's like a normal thing. We just schedule the jobs. We start.
Yeah, but you don't do your framing before your foundation, right? I mean, come on,
No, I mean, it's funny. So one of the things that we do here is that we don't use a scheduling template. We don't because what I've always found is that the best way to learn the job is to schedule the job. And if you use a template, you cheat, and then you cut corners, and then you don't really know all that needs to go into it, or if you've got like some real pinch points that are going to be a problem. So we just kind of roll your sleeves up and start working on a schedule. Different types of software, and then so we'll run it, and then the best person is we go out to the superintendent who's going to be on the job, and those guys are like eternal pessimists when it comes to schedule. So they're like, you guys, I don't know what you do in the office, but they're like, what are you talking about? So it's good. You get some, and then I'm like, hey guys, if we scheduled all the jobs like this, like we'd all be out of work. So, you can't take it. We have to push it a little bit more than what you want to do it. So there's this good kind of push and pull. So I would say you start with the schedule, and then you go out to the supers and just kind of arm wrestle over it and be like, I'll give you a week. You got to give me another week. And we just start working it out.
Well, here's the thing that always, when I look at big picture and look out over these big jobs that are going on, every subcontractor just wants to do all of their work today, right? Yeah, today,
Yeah.
right? And the reality is you can do 80% of it today, and then 5% next week, and then 7% sometime in the future, and then we'll get back to you on the last few percent. And that's a hard management thing. How do you work that out? How do you make that happen?
I think it goes to the subs though. The subs need to be, where we get into problems with this is when we get carryover from commercial to residential. Like the drywaller is a good example, because one day he could be doing like the Google office, and then a week later he's doing level 5 for us, and we're like, the master bathroom's not ready. He's like, well, I want to do it all. I'm like, well, it's not going to happen today. It's not ready.
Yeah.
It's part of the deal. So I think part of it's just getting a sub base that understands the game.
Yeah.
I think our subs do. And it's never always going to be perfect. It's just, it can't be, it's just, nobody is ever, I think if you schedule the job where you got everything done and then 100% ready for the sheetrocker, and then you let the sheetrocker in, it would just, I think the argument could be made like, oh, it'll be faster, cheaper, better, but I don't think so. I think there's just too much stuff that needs to happen where, yes, we'll give you one floor. The fact is you can't skim coat a 10,000 square foot house in one day anyway. So why do you need the whole house ready? That's the conversation we have constantly. The painters are like, we want the whole house. I'm like, why? You don't have enough guys. So I think, it's just unfair
I did a post sort of semi recently, I guess in the last 6 months, but in January on a residential project in Dallas. And people got kind of rubbed the wrong way by this post. And I will tell you why. It was sequencing related. In that it had to do with the window and door details. So the windows on this house were beautifully installed and detailed, but the entry doors were not. They had installed the doors, but hadn't prepared the rough opening. Whatever trade was handling the waterproofing had not prepared the rough opening prior to the doors actually being installed. And I pointed out that it was most likely the case that there existed a detail in the drawing set for the doors, because the details were so well done on the windows. So why is it that they did such a great job on the windows, but they didn't do the doors? And this comes up all the time, of course, that it's a different trade, right? So the waterproofer had not gotten to where the doors were by the time the door contractor was on site to do the work, and the GC, this was an oversight on the GC's part, or not, and the GC was just defied by the subcontractor. But that this was really a sequencing problem, probably not a detailing problem. which of course architects love to hear because they get abused so often in this and attacked for every defect here. When it probably wasn't a detailing mistake. It was a sequencing error. Now, when I pointed this out, a lot of contractors kind of got rubbed the wrong way by this. And I thought that was sort of interesting because I didn't see this as being particularly critical of contractors, in that it's when you're a general contractor and you're not approaching it just as a broker, you're really trying to schedule the job really attentively. You're making some trade-offs, and I sort of assume that a good GC knows that there's going to be a few of these cases where one trade kind of gets ahead and you end up having to, so maybe in a couple cases you have to chip out some stucco, prepare the rough opening and reinstall the door here or there. And you work that into your, a certain amount of that, you work that into the initial plan. You don't, obviously you want to minimize how much rework you have to do, but you have to find your own sweet spot with this stuff. You're not going to be you're not going to hold, as you said with the drywaller, you're not going to hold the drywaller back until he's 100% ready. But the consequence of doing that is that every now and then you have a few things that end up needing to be redone. Can you speak to that? How do you handle that? Do you plan for a little bit of that? Is that a sort of a contingency that you plan for, or do you try to get that to zero, that does not happen?
No, you definitely don't plan to get it to zero, because if you went to that, you'd go insane. You'd snap, and you'd also the client walks in and they're like, "We want to move a light," and you're like, "No, you can't do that." You like freak out, and you're like, "Whoa, wait, what am I doing?" So drywall is a perfect example. Let's just say, for argument's sake, the bid that we're going to carry is $100,000 for drywall. Like, we go in, when you plug that number into our spreadsheet, it then puts like 10% on that number, because this allows us now in the field to like move a light or dig out wires that we know are just buried. And it's not the drywaller's fault, but it's just, this is like how the sausage is made. It happens.
Yeah.
Lately, we've been running into these really awesome tubs that need to get connected from the floor beneath them because there's no drain assembly up top. So like that, everything's done. The kitchen's built and we have to go back to the floor and then cut it out. But now the guys are like, okay, it's no big deal. We knew this was coming. It's budgeted. So I think knowing that like it's not going to be perfect. Waterproofing's another one, because when we do a lot of liquid waterproofing out here, Prosecco, and those guys, like, they're like, we give you 3 visits. You're like, make it 7. Like, it's that's just crazy, right? That you could be, because sometimes it's like they've done everything and you're like, you guys got to do the front door. Oh, but by the way, the front door didn't come in for 6 months after you were done.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff is really specialty, right? Especially with doors and like certain specialty windows. They're long lead times, and
we're figuring it out. So we're just we try to build those things in, because then it alleviates everybody. And also, we want to be the good guy too, to the architect and the client and the interior designer, where they're like, hey, shop drawings were done. You laid everything out. The cans are exactly where we wanted it, with the sprinkler heads and the speakers, and everything lines up when we did our walkthrough. And now when it's sheetrocked, we don't like it. And instead of being like, oh, this is a total disaster, you're like, no, you guys can move a few things. Like, yeah, it's okay. We'll hack the ceiling open. It's good to have a little bit of.
I just want to say, JB was never big on structural stuff. Like, just keep that.
We don't move the structural, but so I think it's, from a sequencing standpoint, you just have to be flexible. And but when you get stuck up against a really tight budget, that's where like it pushes everybody to the brink.
Well, and I think a lot of these problems end up happening with, I'd like to think that a lot of this is not the case in the type of high-end construction and design that we're really talking about. Where I personally see this a lot is this sort of, everybody's a developer now, right? I took a class online, and I'm commercial real estate. That's what I do. I live in Dallas, so there's a lot of we talk a good game in this city, let me tell you. But yeah, it's you know, I watched HGTV, and now I know how to do this stuff, and it's I think that type of, maybe that there's some experience that plays into this as well.
Are you picking on Brett Hull?
Brett Hull? Yeah. Wait, hockey player? What?
No. He's one of these TV guys with some show, like old school renovation. I can't remember the name of the show.
Well, then maybe I should pick on him. I don't know. No, but I don't know. But no, it really, I don't know. People get this sort of HGTV. This stuff is so easy.
It's not easy to do.
No, it isn't.
So Molly, if you had like a wish that could get granted with regard to general contractors.
Wish for more wishes, Molly.
Oh, I know. This is a tough question, Foster.
Yeah, I know. I'm putting you on the spot. I know, but.
Well, first of all, when you said you have a nice schedule, that is always excellent. We have so many jobs where it's like pulling teeth to get the schedule from the contractor, and then it's not the real schedule, so you don't know when you need to give them the details. So that right there, getting a schedule that you stick to, is huge.
Yeah, you didn't answer the question. That was a great
I know. I don't know my wish list.
All right, we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
So with regard to schedule, JB, you know, none of your clients are here. None of the architects you're ever going to work with are ever going to listen to this, so don't worry about it. So do you provide schedules that are just like, this is what I'm going to do, this is my construction schedule, or do you try to, you know, lead the other, you know, people, the other parties in the organ? In other words, like, hey, Mr. Owner, you need to pick your tile by this date, and hey, architect, you need to give us detailed drawings for cabinets by such and such a date so that we can meet our construction schedule. Do you do that, or do you just stick to your own construction schedule?
So I used to just do our construction schedule, and then it would, you know, years and years and years ago, I started putting all the design milestones in, all the shop drawing review, all of that stuff, because what's happening is we're starting projects in the DD phase. So that's fine if we're going to like track a construction project, that's fine. We just all have to be on the same page about like when we actually need decisions. So I've found that when we really schedule a big job, the construction portion of it is the least looked at portion of the whole job, because there'll be all the owner and architect milestones up at the top and all their review, that's what people want to look at and be like, okay, we have to pick the tile by this date. And now we've even gone so far back as we're like, we don't even care what the tile is, just on this date, tell us what your buildup is so that we can frame the assemblies. You know, so I think we're spending more and more time on the schedule and more time not on the construction, because it's weird. Like, you know, we're going to do a double rebar cage mat slab. It's X number of weeks. I don't need to get into that with the client. Like it is what it is. It's going to take us this long because the sub told me it's going to take this long. But what I really want to get into is like all the things that you need to figure out for us. Like, are we going to do the wine cellar? Are we going to do the movie theater? You know, are we going to hire a waterproofing consultant? What are the window and doors going to be? All those.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I would like to every time. I'd rather spend more time on the schedule about, you know, like shop drawing review, for example. It's really easy for us to, you know, we could have a job where we could have 2 or 3 mill shops working on at one time. So I can drop shop drawings on an architect, like, but that doesn't.
Please don't.
Right? You can't review them all. So what's it make a difference, right? So, and it's too much. So it's like figuring that out and spreading that out through the job, and like, you know, categorizing the phases, right? Like this is critical.
You're really making yourself sound agreeable here. I don't get, this is not the
I know,
old
you
JB
sound like
I
the
know.
ideal contractor right now. Someone.
I don't think it's crazy though, right? I mean, we're not. I think it's especially though on projects where we don't have a perfect set of drawings that you can't just like stick your foot on the ground and be like, I need a decision today, or it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, RFIs though, like those sorts of things, like I have an architect that we do a ton of work with, and there's two importance levels of RFIs. There's the RFIs that can take like, you know, ideally we want them in 5 days, but some can take 10 days. And there's some that like, they have to be answered today. Like those, and that's fine. And they're great about it. But like, I tell my guys, like, you can only ask so many of those today questions today, because you know, it sort of defeats the purpose.
I had a boss early in my career who told me that when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, decide.
Exactly. So, but I think the bigger the project, the more you can really stretch everything out, and it can be more linear. What for us is hard is the large scale renovations where, you know, you can demolish, and we can demolish a lot in a week or two and then be putting things back. And then as a result of that, be asking a ton of questions.
Yeah.
And it can be brutal, right? A new house is great because it's very linear, and we've all done it. And, you know, foundation, drainage, it keeps going up. But a renovation, it's like ready, set, go.
What you're gonna find.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some important stuff now. Are you still sailing?
No, I have 3
No?
kids. I own a company.
Yeah. Wow. Are you just totally done? Like, yeah. I'm not crazy. I think JB, you were like almost an Olympic level sailor, right?
Not that high, but I was very into it. But no, now I mountain bike in the dark, because that's
awesome. That sounds really smart. Yeah, too.
What
Yeah.
JB, what did you sail?
All sorts of different boats, a lot of dinghies, some big boats. Out here in California, sailed on a lot of big boats in the bay. So.
Oh, nice. I'm restoring a laser in my backyard.
Oh yeah.
I'm Canadian. It's a Canadian boat.
Yeah, and she lives 300 miles from the ocean too.
Yeah, nice.
Everybody needs a project.
Everybody needs a project. That's right. That's right.
Now, what about kite boarding? When's the last time you did that?
Again, kids in the company. Although, so it's funny. I used to kiteboard a lot, but Foster, some days you'd go down there and there wouldn't be any wind, and like you'd schedule to be there, and so that's a real bummer. Like you can't do your recreational activities. So that's why I got into trail running and mountain biking, because the dirt's always there. And
yeah. Okay.
Day, doesn't make a difference. Any schedule, like you can go early in the morning, you can go at night. Yeah. So
when for the 6 seconds that I knew JB, he was always like, you know, Mr. Fitness and this and that. Although I think, you know, I hate to bring it up, but JB was a witness to the last fist fight I ever had in my life.
Oh my God.
I was a witness to the last almost fist fight you had.
I don't remember that. What the hell was I doing then?
It was in Aspen, and you called somebody kitten.
Oh no, that was nowhere near. No.
Called a man kitten, and the guy
we had a thing, me and him.
And there was this moment of silence where everybody else who was there was like, "Foster's gonna get hit." Bad.
No, that was fine. That was nothing.
Called him sweetheart and was like, "Have a good night, buddy."
Remember that time I took the windshield wipers off your car, and then I put that sticker, that no parking sticker, right on your driver's side?
Worse than that. That hardly tells the story. It was one of these days when I had to like go home to pick up the kids from like the doctor's office at a specific time, and I was like stuck in the office like till the last second. I race out to my car, and it's one of those big orange like "do not park here" things, dead center in my view on the windshield.
Wait, but the fist fight, what happened? Did you win? What's going on?
It was so we were at a sporting event, and we were all like, you know, suited up in masks and everything. So it was nothing, but it's quite frankly, it's a bit of an embarrassment in my adult life. I'm like, Jesus, I had a freaking fist fight at age, whatever the hell I was. And JB was there, and he was just like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not. You. I'm not mistelling this story, am I, JB?
No, that was it. You've matured though, so it's all fine.
I hope so. Apparently not with the kitten thing. So I don't know how much time have we transpired. Oh, we're plenty of time. We're good. So thank you, everybody. But before we go, who's got like last questions, last comments, last anything? Christy?
I got nothing to say, kitten.
There you go. I was sweet. I thought I would. No, he was kitten. No, I can't remember. Anyway.
I can't remember either. It was something like that. This originated, by the way, because I was telling a story about how a man had called me sweetheart on a job on a big commercial tower in Austin, actually. And it was a guy, he had a cowboy hat as a hard hat, which is not OSHA approved. I mean, it was a hard hat material, but like not OSHA approved. And this was really kind of the only time I've really felt like I was being really singled out for being a lady on a job site. And this guy called me sweetheart all day. And
I would have slapped him.
I mean, I wasn't happy about it, but like everybody was uncomfortable, and his name was Butch. Like, I'm not even making it up.
There you go.
Like, that was the guy's name. And anyway, and he was just opposing me with everything. And they had this big plaza deck on the, it's like on the 7th story of this, 30 or 40 story building. I can't remember. And they had screwed up by casting the drains in the concrete with the clamping ring already on them. So not good, basically. And they needed to chip out. I was telling them, like, no, you have to chip this out because you can't waterproof the drains with the clamping ring already on. This is not going to work. This is bad, whatever. And he just was calling me sweetheart all day. And I proposed at the end of the day to that he should, like, he wanted to do it one way, I wanted to do it another way. And I said, well, why don't we just try it both ways? Do a mock-up, whatever. And then there's like probably 15 guys. We're in this meeting, like standing over these drains. And I said, okay, so why don't we do 2 mock-ups, one of your way, one of the other way. Is that going to work for you, kitten?
Nice.
Dead silence. And the guys, like, about, well, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 seconds after, like, painful silence, just erupted in laughter. And for the rest of the job, which was like another 3 years, his name was not Butch, it was Kitten. Everybody called him Kitten. Every sub, everybody called him Kitten. Anyway,
Nice.
That's
he's probably
great.
dead or retired or something, but Foster took that to heart and started calling everybody Kitten that night that I told the story. And
Yeah, it worked out. Look at all my teeth.
Yeah.
Molly, this is your chance, like all the questions you ever wanted to ask a general contractor.
No, I just need to get a project now out in the Bay Area so we can work together.
Yes.
Maybe
After Foster assured that we never work with anyone here.
Why aren't you sending any clients?
What?
Sausalito. I vote for Sausalito.
Okay.
Yeah.
JB, why aren't you sending any clients her way?
Yeah.
I'm working on it now.
Yeah. Now you know. Now you know me, so you can work on it.
Face the name. I got it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So JB, this is your chance. Speaking to all architects, because the listening audience, I think, is several 100,000.
Easily.
Yeah. Or a billion.
A billion, right?
Or a billion.
Almost a billion, just almost.
Yeah. What would you like to tell the architecture listening audience from the general contractor's point of view?
That we want to be involved early, for sure. The sooner the better. And that I would also say that I can't speak for other general contractors. I mean, I know the general contractors out here, but I'm always blown away by the amount of experience that a superintendent brings to the table. Even a superintendent with a PM, because for us, we're always like, my best superintendents, we can sit around and be like, remember all the times we've done this detail wrong? Like, so that I think is the best thing, the sort of ringing endorsement is get the supers involved, however you got to do it. But it's just, I'm always amazed by how much experience they have. And it's
What are you saying? Experience actually counts for something?
It's all based on
Yeah.
failure too, for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
I mean,
Whenever there's a problem, it's always the site super that has come up with the solution because they've done it before.
totally. And they've done it normally, like I'll laugh with my guys. I'm like, well, we're going to do it this way because we've done it all these other ways and they haven't been awesome. So we're just going to, we're going to do it different. We're going to keep working on it. But it's all kind of just this, like, we'll just try it a different way or we'll work it out. And we've done it this way. And, you know, we've got some details for, you know, like flush baseboard, and there'll be like one superintendent who, like, you could call him up and be like, send me that detail, and he'll just sketch it up for you and send it over. So, I mean, I think that's the more people in the room, I think, is a good thing, and not to design. You know, we're always like, I laugh with my guys, you know, if a client were to be like, where do you think we should put the shower head? Like, that's when you step out of the shower and walk away. Like, that is not your area at all. You're not taking a shower in there. It doesn't make a difference but it's like best practice we can get involved with, you know, but like absolutely
Nice.
not where you say you think the shower head should be at 7 feet.
Yeah.
You know,
All right.
hard line.
That's pretty wise and sage advice there. And I think that's a great note to end on. So I don't want to take up everybody's night. JB, thank you. Molly, thank you. Christy, thank you.
Thank you.
Look for this in the future sometime on the ICAA's podcast. I have nothing to do with them publishing it, so could be next week. It could be 10 years from now, for all I know. But I'm sure this is going to race to the top of the charts. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Ciao. End meeting.